Good morning. I am an early riser, and a lot of times I catch a magnificent sunrise. Oh, life of the mountains, it just couldn't be nicer. And in only 15 minutes, that beautiful sunrise changes abruptly. So I got my 360 camera out and decided to stick it out the passenger window while I was driving. I've got it on the monopod, and coming up fairly soon, there's a problem that we've been experiencing up here off of Highway 9. We've got some neighbors that have a winery up here, and unfortunately, the hillside has been slip sliding, and it's been a continuous problem for these poor folks. It's actually the neighbor's property that's coming down onto them, but it makes it a real nuisance for all of us too. Here, I'm going to slow it down here, and I'm going to put a still up here, there. That's what's happening. I froze it, and here's another one. That's just such a mess. And every time it rains, it just covers the road, and it shuts down Highway 9. Well, back to work. We had a complex that we were working at, and they had a number of Chinese pistache. And each of these Chinese pistache had a unique problem. This one was topped off severely at one time and then rounded over again above the topped off parts. And a lot of these trees are breaking. So each of the trees is getting kind of a different treatment. I'm not being consistent with the trees. I'm taking each as an individual and doing what each of these trees needs to have done. And that's an after shot on that one particular tree. I took quite a bit out of it because they are breaking. And by the way, that was a female tree. And adjacent to it was a male tree. Here's a quick shot of, I've shown this in an earlier video. This is also a small pistache, Chinese pistache, and you can see how brittle they become. This was a female tree that was full of the seed pods. This male tree was big and it had a few failures on it, but it wasn't nearly as much of a problem. I like to read the trees and see areas that tell me that there's potential for a break there. Look at the way that top curves. And because it's such a prominent, busy area, we have to be super concerned about, liability. Oh, and some of these trees are growing up and over the sidewalk. That's a pretty good sized pistache there. I'm guessing these trees were planted back in the early 70s. They're sidewalk trees. There's an old wound that was cut off because it was too close to the road. And I'm noticing that in the past, somebody made lots and lots and lots of stub cuts. So I'm trying to clean up some of these stub cuts. I'll show you in a second here what I did to this particular area. There, I cleaned it up and made it a little bit better. Better in my opinion. Now, everybody has their own ideas on how a tree should be pruned. And I'm the last person to say that my way is absolute. But what I do is I read the tree and I try to evaluate areas that look like they may be too heavy or too thick. And because each of these trees is showing evidence of big ripped out branches, we've got to be concerned about that. More stubs everywhere I look in these trees. So many problems. I'm doing the best I can, and at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can do with a tree that was pruned improperly so many times in the past. And look at that cut. Oh my God. That is just, that's horrible. But I can't cut it off because that's all there is on that one branch. But eventually that's going to decay and that'll be a failure. So lots and lots of stubs. I tried to clean up as many of the stubs as I can, but at the end of the day, you've got to get the job done. So that's what that tree looks like when it's all done. And Lucy came along and said, let's take off that lower limb. And I said, no. And she kind of got irritated with me, and she says, it just looks out of place. And I want to show you why. I said no. A large wound on a tree leads to a large area of future decay. And you have to look really closely. And on this tree, you can see where a limb ripped out in the past. So if I take off that big limb, it's going to be associated with this old decay pocket, and it's going to compromise the integrity of that whole section of the tree. So I had a little fruit tree job. This is a plum. And when I got there, the tree was just loaded with hummingbirds. I want to show you this. This is kind of cool. I don't think I've ever seen so many hummingbirds in one location before. Down in Saratoga, there is a valley oak that failed and fell down and took out the power. And this whole area was without power for quite a while. It was a very significant tree. I just stopped to look at it, and the guy that lived there came out to talk to me. So I asked his permission if I could go up closer and look at the root ball. I always like to try to evaluate, why did this tree go down? And obviously the roots are rather decayed. There was some white rot down in there. And it was not a very significant root ball at all. I mean, you look at it for the size of the tree, I mean, that's hardly anything. Somebody came along, I think they were thinking about milling it, and they wanted to cut it and see what it looked like. And so it became very clear to me why this tree fell down. And it's because somebody compromised the whole side of the root ball. All right, this is cool. This is an olive tree. And it was quite hollow. So we had decisions to make. And I got the 360 camera out, and I actually ran it all the way through the tree. All right, we got a difficult tree decision here. We've got an olive tree, and it gets loaded with olives, so it gets very, very heavy. It's been cut back pretty hard many, many times in the past, which has exacerbated the volume of fruit because of all the new branches that come from these hard cuts. But the problem with this tree is it's been splitting out. We've been having lots and lots of problems. We had a big rip here, we had a rip right there. This branch broke off. Over on this side, we had a rip, and there was another rip over there. And to make things even worse, we've got, oh, look at that. You can see right through the tree. So what do we do? Well, I think this tree should go. But because it's part of a complex, and there's a whole group of people that have to make decisions out here, and because people get very sentimental about their trees, we got to do the best we can. So, how much should I take off of this tree? Should I just round it over and hope for the best, or should I make a bunch of big cuts? I think I'm going to make some big cuts. And we got a lot of traffic in here, a lot of people walking in here, so there's a liability associated with this tree, which brings me back to, I think this tree should go. But we're here to prune the tree, and they don't have a permit to cut it down, and so I'm gonna do the best I can with what I think is kind of a problem. So that's the finished job. Yes, I took a lot of big cuts, and I took a lot of weight out, and then ultimately I did round it over. It just looks silly the way all those little hairs stuck out all over the place. So I think it'll probably be safe for a couple of years. I see one little spot on the bottom there. We did clean that up. That one little spot just stuck out like a sore thumb. year, I did a job over at the church down in Saratoga, and sadly we cut down a memorial tree. It was a tree that was planted quite a few years ago that grew, but it didn't do very well, and it evolved into a significant stump. But the top portion died, and they kept chopping and chopping and chopping, and finally reached a point where they just gave up on it. And the old couple that planted it years ago, it was a memorial tree for their son. And I called up Nate and I said, hey, I've got a special tree. And the church was really behind this. They thought it was really, really special. You know, I often give wood to wood turners, and this is a beautiful piece of carob wood. If you've never used carob, it's worth looking into. This is that beech that was from the church, and this is also from the beech. Both sides, one was where it was spalted. This is black oak. That's actually from my property. Oh, that's back at the beach. Look at the coloration in that. Isn't that amazing? It really is. That's just a magnificent piece of wood. And that is the piece that was the memorial bowl, and more of the same. If you get a piece of wood that's starting to decay, you get all these colors. Look at that beautiful script in there. That was gifted to the family that lost their son. There's some more bowls, and oh, that is that's burl wood. I believe that's maple burl. Piece of crepe myrtle sitting in my shop for a number of years, and I've always thought, I wonder what crepe myrtle wood looks like. You know, so I cut a flat on one side and I cut it in half, and when I cut it in half, it revealed to me some of the most extraordinary figure. I never imagined that it would be this beautiful. So what I want to do is I'm going to cut this into 1/4-inch boards, maybe just a hair over 1/4-inch boards, and this will be used for a jewelry box. So let's put a little bit of finish on there. I've got some tung oil. I want to see what it looks like. Doesn't really darken the wood much. Wow, look at that. Crepe myrtle. Who would have guessed that a little tree could have such a beautiful figure in its wood? Well, I finally got around to sanding up one of these pieces of Arizona cypress that we milled last year, and this wood is absolutely gorgeous. The deeper you look, the better the grain. I sanded it up to 320. It's beautiful, just beautiful. And here it is with just a little bit of finish on it. This is that Arizona cypress. Outstanding wood. I'm really impressed with it.